Welcome, dear listener, to the Sleeping Hourglass. Tonight, we step into a chapter shaped by war, yet warmed by an unlikely friendship. This is the true story of Wojtek, a bear who walked beside the men of the Polish Second Corps across deserts and mountains, carrying not only heavy ammunition, but something far more fragile, the hope that kindness could survive even in ruin. If you find comfort in this space, you're welcome to support it quietly with a like or subscription. Only if it feels right. The road through Persia glows like bronze in the afternoon heat. Dust swirls around the boots of men who no longer belong to any country. Soldiers of the Polish Second Corps, marching beneath borrowed flags, carrying packs heavy not just with weapons, but with memory. They move as if through a dream that will not end, their eyes tired, their laughter forced. Behind them lie Siberia's frozen camps, hunger and loss. Ahead lies only the next horizon, shimmering like a mirage. Among them, talk drifts like smoke, stories of wives and mothers, of forests that once sang with birds, of bread that tasted of home. But these are ghosts of a country that exists now only in words. In exile, nostalgia becomes a second uniform, worn beneath the fabric of the first. At the edge of a small village near Hamadan, a boy waits. His clothes are torn, his eyes bright with both caution and courage. In his arms, he holds something wrapped in a rough piece of cloth. It squirms, small and alive. The men approach slowly, unsure whether to smile or to keep their distance. War has taught them suspicion, yet the child's gaze disarms them more quickly than any weapon. When he unfolds the cloth, a soft sound escapes. A small, hoarse cry. A cub. Brown fur matted with dust, eyes too large for its head, tiny paws searching the air for a mother who is gone. The boy speaks in Farsi, gestures in the air, hunger, thirst, loss. The soldiers understand only fragments, but they understand enough. The cub's mother, he explains through signs and broken words, was killed by hunters in the hills. The cub has no one now. The boy, too poor to care for it, hopes to sell it to anyone kind enough or desperate enough to take it. The soldiers look at one another. Their rations are thin, their journey endless, their lives uncertain. Yet something stirs in them, a longing older than language. They pool coins, trade tins of food, perhaps even a knife. The exchange is quiet, almost sacred in its simplicity. One orphaned creature for another. The boy nods, relieved and sorrowful, then disappears into the dust, leaving behind the faint smell of milk and smoke. The cub blinks up at the men, confused but unafraid. One of them, a private named Pyotr, scoops him into his arms. He's heavy, he laughs softly, though the weight feels like nothing compared to what they carry in their hearts. Another soldier offers a can of condensed milk, the only kind they have. They pour it into a bottle, tilt it gently toward the cub's mouth. The small creature latches eagerly, drinking as if he has discovered salvation in the taste of sugar and warmth. They laugh for the first time in days. A real, unguarded laughter. It rolls through the camp like a sudden wind. Men gather to watch, to touch, to marvel at this wild thing so unbothered by war. Someone jokes that he must be enlisted too. Someone else suggests a name. Wojtek, happy warrior. The name feels right, like a blessing. From that moment, he belongs to them. At night, when the stars unfold across the Persian sky, Wojtek curls beside their tents, a bundle of fur and trust. He whimpers softly in his sleep, dreaming perhaps of mountains and mothers. The soldiers, too, dream of Poland's rivers, of summer fields untouched by boots or bombs. In those moments, the boundaries between man and beast dissolve. They are all wanderers in the wilderness of history, clinging to whatever tenderness remains. Days stretch into weeks. Wojtek learns quickly how to follow, how to play, how to stand upright and paw at the air when someone offers him fruit. He wrestles with boots, chews on spare belts, and occasionally tumbles into supply crates, emerging with an expression of clumsy pride. The men adore him. His presence changes the rhythm of their march. Lotta returns. They have something to protect now, not a nation, but a life. The bear cub becomes more than a mascot. He is a symbol of their endurance, their humor, their refusal to surrender the small joys that make them human. Around the campfire, they tell stories of him. How he once stole an entire loaf of bread. How he chased a scorpion into the sand. How he growled at an officer before realizing the man was only stretching. Each tale grows larger with every telling, as if the men need to believe that kindness, too, can become legend. When the convoys move again, Wojtek rides in one of the trucks, his head poking out like a child at a window. The desert stretches endlessly, but he seems unbothered. Sometimes he stands upright, swaying with the motion, paws resting on the truck's edge, the wind flattening his fur. The soldiers wave from other vehicles, calling his name. "Hey, Wojtek!" And he looks toward them as though he understands. In him, they see a reflection of themselves, uprooted, orphaned, yet still curious, still unbroken. A bear born in captivity, raised by soldiers without a country. Together they form a strange kind of family, stitched by the common thread of survival. As the weeks pass, Wojtek grows, his coat darkens, his appetite expands, his steps grow surer. He learns to open ration tins with surprising skill, using claws that glint like small knives in the sun. When the men bathe in streams, he splashes beside them. When they rest, he curls against their boots. At dusk, when the light turns gold, they see his eyes shining, steady, watchful, kind. Sometimes, a soldier will sit beside him and speak quietly in Polish, words the bear cannot understand, but somehow receives. Confessions, perhaps. Prayers, the kind that men whisper only when they think no one is listening. Wojtek listens anyway. His silence is a bomb. Neither judgment nor answer, only presence. And in war, presence can be its own form of grace. One evening, a storm sweeps across the desert. Tents rattle, sand stings the eyes. The men huddle together, and in the corner of one tent, Wojtek presses close against Pyotr's legs, trembling. The soldier wraps an arm around him. "It's all right, Moi Wojownik," he murmurs, "little warrior." The storm passes, the bear's heartbeat slows. When dawn comes, the sky clears to a soft pink, and the air smells briefly of rain and hope. From then on, the men begin to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, they can carry something more than sorrow through this war. A small, clumsy creature has reminded them that gentleness is not weakness, that even in exile, one can nurture, protect, and love. And so the legend begins. Not with the roar of battle, but with the soft sound of milk in a bottle, of laughter returning to broken men. Somewhere ahead lies the long road south, deserts, barracks, and borders still to cross. But tonight, beneath the Persian stars, a bear sleeps beside soldiers who have remembered how to feel human again. The sun rises over the Middle Eastern plain, pale and heavy, as though it too carries the weight of war. Rows of tents stretch across the dust, their canvas edges trembling in the wind. Between them move the men of the Polish II Corps, soldiers without a country, each one a fragment of a nation that no longer exists on any map. They wake before dawn to the sound of boots against gravel, mess tins clattering, and orders called in borrowed tongues. Yet even among the drills and fatigue, a strange rhythm hums through the camp, the laughter of men trying to remember what peace once felt like. Wojtek, now larger and far more mischievous, has become part of that rhythm. He trots between tents with the unhurried authority of a creature unaware of ranks or wars. His fur has grown thick, his eyes curious and gentle. Soldiers salute him jokingly when he passes, as though greeting a commander of joy amid the hierarchies of sorrow. In the mornings, he plays with their helmets, nudging them across the dirt, flipping them like toys. When a soldier leaves his boots unattended, Wojtek drags them away, pawing at the laces until they become a tangled victory. Sometimes, he sneaks into the supply tent and emerges triumphantly with stolen oranges or tins of jam. The men pretend to scold him, though their laughter gives them away. They are men remade by exile. Many had once been farmers, teachers, musicians. Now they march in dust, their hands hardened by rifles and sun. But when they see Wojtek wrestling with a rope or tumbling in the sand, something soft stirs inside them. He becomes a mirror, a reminder that they too can still play, still care, still find joy even when everything else has been stripped away. Around the evening fires, they tell stories, not of tactics or battles, but of home. One speaks of the smell of rye bread baking in his mother's kitchen. Another recalls the taste of cold water drawn from a village well at dawn. They speak in low voices, as if afraid their words might vanish into the dark. Wojtek listens, curled beside them, eyes half closed. When one of them laughs too loudly, he lifts his head, curious. When the tone shifts to sadness, he leans closer, resting his massive paw on a man's knee, as though to say, "I am here." In this camp of ghosts, the bear becomes something living and constant, an unspoken promise that life persists. The men's journey is long and directionless. They move from one training ground to another, from Iraq to Palestine, from Syria to Egypt. The maps in their pockets show places they have never known, while the places they love no longer have names. They march beneath the banners of allies, British insignia on their sleeves, Polish hearts beneath their ribs. Orders arrive in English. Prayers remain in Polish. They are soldiers for a cause larger than themselves, but also smaller, the hope of one day walking their homeland's soil again. In the heat of the day, they train among dunes and thorn bush. The sun burns through wool and discipline alike. Yet somewhere in the distance laughter rises, because Wojtek, oblivious to ranks, is stealing a soldier's cap again. He runs clumsily through the sand, his great paws leaving deep marks like signatures. The men chase after him, cursing through their grins, forgetting for a moment the H of exile. He is no longer just their pet. He is a brother in arms, a companion in displacement. The officers tolerate his presence, even grow fond of him. They note how morale rises in his company, how the men's shoulders straighten, how loneliness eases when the bear wanders near. He is chaos wrapped in fur, but he is also the pulse of life inside a weary army. When mail arrives, some soldiers receive letters from families who have survived the German occupation, while others receive nothing. Silence, the heaviest envelope of all. Those who get news read aloud, sharing it like bread. Those who do not simply listen, faces lit by the flicker of evening fire. And through it all, Wojtek lumbers close, sniffing curiously, pressing his nose against knees or hands, as though scent alone could locate the lost. One night, as the wind sweeps over the camp, Pyotr, the same soldier who once fed him condensed milk, sits beside him. He strokes the bear's thick fur, staring into the dark. "Do you think," he murmurs, "we will ever go back?" Wojtek only blinks, patient, timeless. In that silence lies the truest answer. Perhaps not. But they will keep walking all the same. In the months that follow, their brotherhood deepens. They celebrate Wojtek's small victories as their own. The day he learns to stand on his hind legs, to reach a can of peaches, or the time he gently lifts a rifle in his mouth, earning roars of laughter. The soldiers begin painting his likeness on their trucks and equipment. A bear carrying an artillery shell, the emblem feels right. It carries humor, pride, and memory, a symbol of what they have become. Bearers of impossible burdens, walking onward with dignity. When newcomers arrive at the camp, it is Wojtek who greets them first. He ambles toward them, curious, and the men watch their expressions shift from fear to wonder. It is as if the bear himself welcomes them into this strange fellowship of the displaced, saying without words, "You belong now. You are one of us." At mealtimes, he sits beside them, drinking beer from a bottle with surprising precision. They laugh, clapping him on the back as if he were one of the lads. And in truth he is. Beneath the vast Persian sky, the boundary between beast and man blurs, and all that remains is companionship. War takes much. Countries, families, the certainty of tomorrow. But it cannot take the small mercies the men forge for themselves. Around the fire, they sing songs of Poland, slow, aching tunes that drift like prayers. Wojtek sways beside them, eyes closing to the rhythm. Perhaps he does not understand the words, but he understands the feeling, the sound of belonging, however fragile. The nights are cool and wide. Sometimes the soldiers lie awake, watching the stars shimmer beyond the canvas of their tents. They think of the long road behind them and the longer one ahead. Beside them, Wojtek sleeps. A creature born of the wild, now tamed by tenderness. His breath is steady, his warmth real. The men listen to it as one might listen to proof that something pure still survives. He is, they come to realize, the embodiment of what they cannot say aloud. That even in exile, one can carry home within oneself. In memory, in laughter, in shared survival, and so the days unfold. Drills, songs, letters, losses, and the slow, steady companionship of a bear who knows nothing of politics or flags, only of presence. In the heart of war's wandering, Wojtek becomes the still point. Around him, the men find their humanity again, not through orders or victories, but through the simple act of caring for something that asks for nothing in return. As the convoys prepare to move once more, this time toward Egypt's burning sands, the soldiers glance at the bare padding faithfully beside them. They march onward beneath no flag but memory, carrying their laughter, their longing, and one quiet creature who has become their home. The desert stretches like an unfinished thought, vast, open, waiting. Dust clings to the men's faces, to their boots, to every breath drawn between command and silence. The Polish two-corps moves slowly southward, a column of exiles crossing a landscape that feels ancient and indifferent. Between the trucks, a brown figure lumbers, larger now, less cub than creature, his coat sun-bleached and his gait confident. Wojtek, the happy warrior, has grown into his name. He walks beside the convoy, as though he understands their purpose. When the men stop to rest, he sits patiently, tongue lolling, eyes half closed against the wind. When they move again, he trots forward, paws pressing into the sand with steady rhythm. The soldiers joke that he's the only one who never complains. War, for the moment, has softened into routine. Training, marching, waiting. The kind of waiting that stretches time thin until the hours themselves feel dusty. In the shimmering heat, tents rise and fall with the sun. The men speak little during the day, their energy spent on endurance. But when evening comes, and the air cools to a tolerable breath, life returns. Tin cups clink, cigarettes glow in cupped hands. Voices rise, some singing, some laughing, some whispering prayers into the dark, and always near the fire is Wojtek. He has learned their habits. He sits when they sit, eats when they eat, and drinks from bottles like a soldier at ease. Someone has taught him to salute, a motion so comically solemn that it always earns applause. He raises his paw, waits for acknowledgement, and lowers it with slow dignity, as if aware of the laughter he brings. The men reward him with fruit or scraps of bread, small offerings to joy. When night deepens, and the last stories drift into silence, Wojtek curls beside the tents. The soldiers fall asleep to the sound of his breathing, deep, calm, steady. In a world unraveling, it becomes the closest thing to peace. By day, the march continues, through mountain passes and barren valleys where even the air seems tired. The trucks rattle, overloaded with men and memory. The roads are narrow and cruel. Every few miles, the convoy halts for repairs or rest, and Wojtek climbs aboard the nearest vehicle with a grunt, sitting upright like a passenger who knows his seat. The sight of him never fails to lift spirits. British officers visiting the camp laugh, shaking their heads. "You Poles," they say, "have even trained a bear for war." The soldiers only smile. They know that Wojtek is not a weapon, but a reminder that the heart, like the bear, can survive almost anything. There are moments of quiet wonder too. Once, in the hills between Kermanshah and Baghdad, they find a spring. Clear water spilling through rocks, green moss soft beneath their boots. The men kneel, cupping handfuls of coolness to their lips. Wojtek wades in without hesitation, splashing like a child sending arcs of sunlight into the air. His joy infects them. They laugh until their sides ache. For a few hours, they are not soldiers or refugees, only men alive in the warmth of the earth. At dusk, they camp among palm trees, where shadows stretch long and gold. The muezzin's call drifts faintly from a distant village, mingling with the soft crackle of their fires. One of the men, a fiddler before the war, plays a tune on a borrowed violin. It is slow and melancholy, carrying across the sand like the sound of a memory trying to find its way home. Wojtek sits near him, head tilted, listening. His ears twitch at each note, as though the melody were some language he almost understands. The soldiers listen too, faces turned toward the stars, toward the Poland that exists now only in their hearts. The music binds them, invisible and eternal. Later, when the instrument falls silent, Pyotr whispers, "He listens better than most officers." The others chuckle softly. Wojtek yawns, lies down, and places his head on his paws. The night exhales around them. Days blur into one another. The march, the training, the waiting. Wojtek grows heavier, stronger. He learns to lift crates with his forepaws, to open gates, to follow commands shouted in Polish. His loyalty is unspoken but absolute. When the soldiers wash their uniforms in rivers, he joins them. standing upright in the current, pawing at the water as if to imitate their gestures. They splash him in return, and the camp fills with laughter. For a brief, miraculous instant, the war seems far away, nothing but a rumor carried on the wind. In the afternoons, when the sun becomes unbearable, they seek shade beneath canvas awnings. The air smells of sweat and tobacco, of oil and sand. Wojtek lies stretched beside them, panting softly. Sometimes he rolls onto his back, paws in the air, demanding attention. Someone scratches his belly. Another tosses him a half-empty canteen. Small gestures, but they mean everything. Because under the jokes and songs, there remains the ache of absence, the homeland that none of them can return to. They speak of it rarely now, as though afraid the very word Poland might break them. Instead, they pour their longing into the small acts of care that keep them human, sharing a crust of bread, fixing a comrade's torn boot, patting a bear's fur before sleep. And Wojtek, in his simple way, gives back more than they could ever explain. His presence makes exile bearable. In his company, they remember not who they were forced to become, but who they once were. Kind, hopeful, capable of laughter that reaches the eyes. As they cross into Iraq, the terrain changes. The air thickens with dust and heat. The horizon shimmers endlessly. The men grow quieter, their strength reserved for endurance. Yet in the evenings, Wojtek still finds ways to draw smiles, stealing a soldier's hat, climbing halfway into a jeep, refusing to move until bribed with fruit. He becomes both a legend and a comfort, their unofficial comrade, their emblem of survival. Around him, men who have seen death and displacement remember what gentleness feels like. It is not much, but it is enough. And so the long road south unfolds, a journey of dust and laughter, of songs sung in the wrong language to the right heart. Through it all, Wojtek walks beside them, not knowing what waits ahead, but trusting the road, the men, and the invisible thread that binds them all together. Somewhere beyond the horizon lies Egypt. Another chapter of heat and duty, of waiting and becoming. The soldiers cannot yet imagine what it will hold. For now, they march, and the bear marches with them, a living echo of the homeland they carry inside. As the convoy disappears into the setting sun, their shadows lengthen across the sand, men and bear, one shape, one story. Ahead lies Egypt and the camp at Qassasin, where discipline will harden and laughter must fight to survive. The desert around Qassasin hums with silence, not the peace of stillness, but the heavy quiet of heat, of waiting. The sun rules the camp by day, and its glare flattens everything it touches. Canvas tents wilt, rifles glint like thin lines of fire, and the men of the Polish Sioux Corps move through the air as though walking underwater. This is Egypt 1943. The heart of the war beats far away, in the fields of Italy, in the skies of Europe. But here, beneath this sun, time stretches thin. Each morning begins with the call of a bugle and the taste of dust. Each afternoon melts into drills, marching, and the dry echo of shouted orders. And through it all, Wojtek endures. He has grown into a magnificent creature, tall enough now to look a man in the eye when he stands on his hind legs, heavy enough that his playful tackles can knock over even the strongest soldier. His fur has deepened to a sunlit bronze, roughened by sand and salt. Yet his eyes remain the same, curious, untroubled, endlessly alive. When the camp begins to wake, Wojtek is already moving. He wanders between tents, sniffing at the cookhouse, nosing open crates, searching for mischief. The men have learned to keep their fruit well hidden. Still, he finds it. He always does. An orange rolling from a table is enough to begin the morning's laughter. "Zunovuon," someone calls. "Him again!" as the bear lumbers through the sand, prize in mouth, chased by half a dozen shouting soldiers. It is a familiar scene, and one that never fails to ease the day's edge. Qassasin is both training ground and exile. The men practice maneuvers under the unforgiving sky, salutes, formations, and endless marches through sand that burns through their boots. Sweat runs into their eyes, blurring the world into gold and grit. But where order reigns too strictly, Wojtek brings disorder, the kind that keeps the spirit alive. During rest periods, he joins their wrestling matches. The soldiers circle him, laughing, slapping their knees in mock challenge. Wojtek rears up, paws wide, eyes bright. With a roar that is more excitement than threat, he charges. His opponent, usually some overconfident private, never lasts long. Within seconds, the man is pinned, laughing helplessly beneath 1,000 pounds of fur and joy. They clap the bear's back, call him Nosaduma, our pride. He has become more than mascot now. His image is painted on trucks and badges. A bear carrying an artillery shell, strong and unbothered. To the outside world, it is a symbol of humor. But to the men who march beneath that emblem, it means something deeper, courage softened by heart. Wojtek reminds them that they are still more than soldiers. They are survivors, friends, and men who once believed in gentler days. At dusk, when drills end and the heat finally loosens its grip, the camp breathes again. The smell of stew rises from field kitchens. Laughter threads between tents. Someone strums a mandolin, its notes fragile but true. Wojtek settles among them, his huge body stretched across the sand, the glow of the fire warming his fur. The men lean against him as they talk, using him as a pillow, a companion, a reminder that comfort can still be found in unlikely shapes. "Do you think he dreams?" one asks. "Of course." Another answers, "Maybe of snow." They fall quiet at that thought. Snow, Poland, the forests of home. The bear's breathing is slow and steady. To the men, it sounds like the rhythm of something eternal, a pulse of the earth itself, older than their sorrow, stronger than their exile. And in that sound, they find a kind of faith. The desert has its own music. The hiss of sand through canvas, the whisper of wind along the rifles, the soft shuffle of boots in the early hours. It is not a forgiving place, but it teaches endurance. Wojtek learns too. He finds shade wherever he can, beneath trucks, beneath water tanks, or sprawled against the sides of tents. When the heat becomes unbearable, he plunges into the camp's water supply. Vast metal barrels meant for rationing. He sinks in with a splash that sends curses echoing across the grounds. Men rush out shouting, waving their arms, but it's too late. The bear sits content, head above the rim, eyes half closed in bliss. "Out, Wojtek," they shout, half laughing. He blinks, unmoving. The water ripples around him, reflecting a creature at peace in a world gone mad. It takes half a dozen men and a trail of fruit to lure him out again. The water, once sacred, is now brown and full of fur. Yet no one truly minds. The absurdity of it, a bear bathing where soldiers train, becomes another legend. Another story to tell on sleepless nights. Weeks drift into months. Training intensifies. The corpse prepares for movement, though none yet know to where. The monotony of camp life weighs on them, the ache of waiting sharper than any wound. Letters from home arrive rarely, and when they do, They are bittersweet reminders of distance. But always there is Wojtek, the living antidote to despair. When tempers flare, he interrupts with comic timing, nosing between men until their anger dissolves into laughter. When boredom grows unbearable, he becomes their entertainment, learning tricks for treats, standing tall, saluting, rolling barrels across the sand. Each act a small rebellion against the grey machinery of war. And when darkness falls, and the desert cools into quiet, he lies near their fires, a sentinel of warmth. The men talk softly of futures they may never see, and somehow, in the bear's calm presence, those dreams feel possible again. They begin to believe that perhaps this strange brotherhood, men and bear, exile and endurance, is its own kind of home. For home, they realize, is not only soil, it is the place where laughter returns after sorrow. It is the company of those who keep the spirit from breaking. In Qassasin, beneath the indifferent stars, a bear teaches soldiers how to live again. Beyond the camp's lights, the desert stretches toward the unseen sea, where ships wait and destiny stirs. Soon they will cross the waters to Italy, to mountains and thunder, and the test of courage itself. The desert morning begins with male call. It is a ritual that always draws a crowd, no matter the hour or the heat. The men gather near the supply tent, boots scuffing the sand, each face lit by a flicker of hope. Envelopes, worn thin from travel, are sorted and shouted one by one. Names like fragments of a life left behind. Nowik, Zielinski, Kowalski. The soldiers step forward, hands outstretched. Some clutch letters as though holding proof that home still breathes. Others, hearing no name, step back quietly into the sunlight, their smiles vanishing into dust. For months, silence had been their enemy, more cruel than any bullet. But now, the silence breaks and it hurts. News has finally come from Poland. Warsaw is burning. Towns have vanished. Families scattered, missing, or worse. The homeland they remember, green forests, rivers, white winters, now leaves only in memory. One man reads by the shadow of a truck, his fingers tracing every line. Another folds his letter before finishing, unable to bear the rest. A third tucks the paper into his breast pocket and walks away without a word. The desert wind lifts their grief and scatters it across the sand. And through it all, Wojtek watches. The bear senses what men cannot say. He moves slowly between them, nose brushing against hands and knees, a living warmth in the middle of desolation. When someone sits alone, staring at the horizon, Wojtek comes and sits beside him. He does not nudge or paw. He only breathes, steady and close. There is something ancient in that gesture, as though he understands that sorrow needs no fixing, only presence. The men begin to speak to him in low voices. Confessions meant not for answers but release. "Do you know, Wojtek," murmurs Private Stizak, "my mother kept bees. The hives stood behind the house. She said they knew when war was near." The bear listens, head tilted, eyes soft. She said bees remember where home is. No matter how far they fly, Stazak falls silent. Wojtek exhales, a long sigh through his nose, and lays a paw across the soldier's boot. It feels like agreement. Grief lingers in the camp like the taste of dust. But soldiers, by instinct or necessity, learn to turn sorrow into ritual. They begin to share what little joy they can invent. One day, they dress Wojtek in a soldier's cap and jacket, cheering as he lumbers proudly through inspection. Another day, they build a makeshift post office, Ozad Wojcika, they call it, where the bear sits behind a crate, pretending to hand out letters. The laughter that follows echoes across the desert, pure and sharp against the dry air. It feels almost wrong to laugh, yet laughter becomes their only defiance. Wojtek, with his shambling grace, becomes the heart of it. Their gentle fool, their healer. His antics draw them back from the edge. He splashes water from barrels, steals soap from the showers, drags a sack of bread halfway across camp before being caught and scolded like a mischievous child. When discipline falters, an officer shakes his head, muttering, "Even the bear mocks our war." And perhaps he does. Perhaps that's what they need. At night, the tone changes, the camp quiets. Fires burn low, their glow flickering against canvas walls. The men sit in small circles, letters unfolded once more, reading aloud the fragments that hurt less. My brother is in Siberia. My father stayed behind. My wife, she says she still keeps my coat on the chair. Each word lands gently, like ashes falling. Wojtek moves among them, settling where the shadows gather thickest. When a voice breaks, he leans close, pressing his weight against the trembling shoulder. The men call it the bear's comfort, a wordless solace that no chaplain or comrade can provide. In his fur, they smell the earth. In his eyes, they see something steadfast, something untouched by human cruelty. He carries no rank, no flag, no side, only loyalty, vast and uncomplicated. One evening, after a day of hard training and heavy news, Sergeant Pyotr sits beside Wojtek with a scrap of paper in his hand. He has written and rewritten a letter to his wife, but every version feels wrong. Words don't reach far enough, he mutters. The bear blinks slowly, watching him tear the paper in half. "You understand, don't you?" Pyotr whispers. "Some things can't be written." Wojtek presses his nose to the soldier's shoulder. Pyotr laughs softly, a fragile sound, half joy, half pain. He leans his head against the bear's neck, closing his eyes. That night, he does not finish the letter, but he sleeps for the first time in weeks. The next morning, the mood shifts again. War has its rhythm: sorrow, laughter, duty, and waiting. The men learn to live within its strange cadence. A new shipment of mail arrives. This time, fewer letters carry bad news. A few bring photographs, children in Sunday clothes, wives in gardens, parents standing in front of houses that still stand. Those who receive none are not forgotten. They share in the hope of others. Wojtek, sensing celebration, snatches a letter and runs, chased by roaring laughter through the tents. When they catch him, they find the envelope intact, slobbered but safe. "See," someone says, "even the bear delivers our mail." The camp roars with mirth, and for a moment it feels like the world has paused, like war is just a rumor from another place. As the days pass, the soldiers begin to notice something. Grief and joy are not opposites, but companions. One cannot survive without the other. They live side by side like shadows and flame, and in the center of it all, a bear. Once orphaned, now a keeper of hearts, teaches them how to endure both. They laugh because they must. They cry because they remember, and Wojtek stays beside them, constant as the desert stars. When night comes, the camp falls into silence once more. Letters are folded and tucked away, candles dim. Wojtek settles into sleep among his brothers in arms, his heartbeat steady in the sand. Beyond the tents, the world prepares to move again, toward the sea, toward Italy, toward fire. And in that waiting hush, the men dream not of victory, but of return, and of the strange, gentle creature who taught them how to feel human again. The morning light spreads across the harbour like oil on calm water. The Polish two-corps stands ready to embark, their boots thudding softly against the metal gangways as they load crates, weapons, and silence. Wojtek moves among them, nosing at barrels and duffel bags, his brown fur glinting gold in the rising sun. He does not understand departure, but he feels its weight, the strange quiet before motion, the deep hum of anticipation beneath human voices. The men speak in low tones, Polish words laced with dust and salt. They have marched across deserts, survived exile, built camaraderie out of displacement. Now they board a ship not as wanderers, but as soldiers bound for Europe. Their Europe, though most have not seen it since it was torn from maps. Wojtek watches them go, and when the ship begins to tremble under his paws, he stands tall, ears twitching. Somewhere below, the engines awaken. The sea answers with a sigh. As the vessel drifts from the Persian shore, men lean over the rails and stare into the receding distance. Mountains blur into haze. The desert's breath fades. Wojtek presses his paws to the edge of the deck, his snout turned toward the endless water. To him, the sea must seem a living thing, vast, restless, whispering. The wind lifts his fur and carries the scent of salt and oil, of new beginnings that taste faintly of fear. The soldiers laugh softly at the sight of him. Their bear, their comrade, standing like a sentinel of nature aboard a warship. One of them jokes that Wojtek has seen more of the world than any general. Another ties a rope loosely around his middle so he can move safely along the rails. Wojtek grumbles, tugging at it, but accepts the rule. Like them, he has learned discipline. Like them, he is part of something larger than himself. They call him now by his full title, Private Wojtek, officially enlisted in the Polish army, complete with a rank and serial number. Bureaucracy had to invent a space for him, a line on a manifest, a soldier's paybook, because no one could imagine leaving him behind. Paper and ink have made him a brother. And somehow, if the formality feels right, war has taken their homes, their families, their roots. In its place, it gives them this strange fraternity, a bear in uniform, a creature of loyalty and laughter amid loss. Days pass in a rhythm as ancient as the tide. Morning drills on deck, midday meals shared in shade. The clatter of tin cups, the echo of boots, the creak of the hull. The sea becomes their world, its boundaries wide and blue. The men teach Wojtek to stand near the bow where the spray cools his face. He leans into it, eyes half closed, as if reading the wind. Sometimes he growls softly at the waves, and they answer with foam and hiss. At night, the ship grows quiet. The stars appear, indifferent yet consoling, the same ones that shone over Poland's forests long ago. The men gather on deck, wrapped in blankets, smoking and murmuring stories. Wojtek lies among them, a living warmth. Someone hums a Polish lullaby, the kind sung to children in a time before exile. The melody drifts between them like smoke. For a few moments, the ship is not a vessel of war, but a floating hearth, carrying a small, flickering light across a darkened world. The soldiers talk of home, of birch trees, of frozen rivers, of the smell of rye bread in the morning. Wojtek listens, head resting on his paws. He does not know the words, but he knows their tone, longing softened by hope. A sergeant reaches out and pats his back, whispering, "We're going home, friend, maybe not to the same Poland, but home all the same." Wojtek snuffles in reply, a sound between a sigh and a growl, and the men smile. They take it as agreement. but beneath the warmth an undercurrent of unease flows. The destination ahead is not peace, but Monte Cassino, the shattered hill where the war grinds against stone and memory. Rumors travel among the ranks, the monastery destroyed, the slopes mined, the enemy entrenched. The men speak of it in fragments, as if saying the name too clearly might summon misfortune. The sea remains calm, unwilling to betray its passengers' fears. One afternoon, as gulls circle and the horizon ripples with heat, the captain allows Wojtek to wander near the cargo bay. There, soldiers load crates marked with artillery rounds, heavy, cold, meant for destruction. Wojtek watches them, his large head tilting with curiosity. He reaches out a paw, touching one crate gently. The men laugh, half in awe, half in disbelief. He's inspecting the ammunition, one says. He knows what's coming. Perhaps he does. Animals sense tension, and Wojtek has lived too long among soldiers not to understand the change in atmosphere. The tightening of silence, the way laughter now ends too soon. The bear grows restless, pacing. He wants the ground to stop moving, to feel solid earth beneath him again. But there is no earth yet, only water stretching endlessly toward destiny. As evening falls, a soft mist gathers over the deck. The lights from the ship glow like tiny suns in a world of vapor. A lieutenant kneels beside Wojtek, brushing the damp from his fur. Tomorrow, he whispers, we'll see land again. Italy, you'll like it. Green hills, olives, wind that smells of life. Wojtek nudges the man's shoulder gently, as if to say he understands. Then he settles down beside him, his great body a wall of warmth against the night chill. By dawn, the first shapes appear, mountains faintly blue against the horizon. Italy rises from the sea like a promise. The men crowd the rails, faces lit by hope and apprehension. Wojtek stands among them, eyes fixed forward. The wind brings scents unknown to him, pine and smoke, soil and danger. Someone begins to sing, a quiet Polish hymn. Trembling yet unbroken, others join. The sound carries over the water, a fragile defiance. As the ship approaches the port, orders are shouted, ropes cast, anchors dropped. The men prepare to disembark, rifles checked, helmets tightened. Wojtek waits beside them, his harness fitted, his tag shining faintly in the sun. He looks back once, toward the sea they've crossed, and then forward, toward the hills where war still breathes. The line between man and beast has blurred. What remains is loyalty. When the ramp lowers, he steps onto Italian soil with the others. Around him, the air smells of lemons, gun oil, and history. For the first time, the bear who once drank milk from bottles in Persia stands as a soldier on European ground. He is no longer a symbol of escape, but of endurance. The men march inland, their shadows stretching long behind them. Wojtek follows, paws heavy yet steady. The road winds upward, toward the mountains, toward Monte Cassino, toward whatever fate waits among its ruins. Above them, the gulls cry and circle, as if reluctant to let them go. The sea fades behind them, its song swallowed by the hum of trucks and distant thunder. Ahead lies a hill wrapped in smoke and prayer, Monte Cassino, and there, amid the roar of battle, Wojtek's quiet strength will become legend. The morning opens grey and heavy, the kind of dawn that hides the sun, as if the world itself hesitates to begin again. The mountains of Monte Cassino stand ahead, not as peaks, but as wounds torn open by months of bombardment. Clouds cling to the monastery ruins like shrouds. Below, the Polish corps gathers in the valley, their faces drawn and silent. The air carries the smell of gun oil, wet stone, and resolve. The men of Poland have come far, across deserts, seas, and exiles of the heart. Now, before them lies a hill that has devoured armies. The Germans hold the heights, the Allies hold their breath. The wind stirs dust and ashes together, and somewhere a chaplain's voice rises in prayer, its Latin syllables trembling in the cold. Wojtek stands among the soldiers, immense and still, a dark shape against the pale morning. His breath steams in the air, around his neck. His harness gleams faintly. The mark of a comrade, not a pet. He waits for the signal, sensing the tension in the men's bodies. When they shift their weight, he shifts his. When they rise, so does he. A sergeant pats his side. "Ready, brother," he murmurs. The bear gives a low rumble, deep and soft, like the echo of a drum. It is enough. The soldiers smile, a fragile, fleeting smile in the face of the storm to come. Then the mountain speaks. Artillery thunders from below, shaking the sky. The earth itself quivers, dust falling like snow from shattered walls. The men move, climbing through gullies, crawling through rubble, inching toward the monastery. Shrapnel whistles overhead. The air becomes a storm of metal and prayer, and amid it all, Wojtek walks. He carries ammunition shells, heavy, slick with mud and oil, between the gun crews. Upright, balanced, sure-footed, he moves through chaos as if born to it. Each shell is placed gently at a soldier's feet, his claws careful not to crush the casing. The men shout and cheer, not out of mockery, but awe. Look at him. Our Wojtek, the bear fights with us. For a moment, fear loosens its grip. The absurdity becomes grace. Wojtek does not understand war, not as men do. He knows sound and scent, danger and belonging. The air burns his nose with cordite and smoke, but he does not flinch. He knows these men, their voices, their laughter, their grief, and that knowing is enough to keep him steady. Around him, soldiers fall, rise, crawl. The line holds. The bear keeps moving, each step a quiet act of faith. Above them, the monastery looms, shattered walls silhouetted against a sky streaked with flame. Once a house of prayer, now a fortress of ruin. History itself seems to tremble there, as if God and man were locked in argument. The Polish soldiers advance, step by painful step, carrying not only weapons, but the memory of Warsaw, of mothers and sisters and songs sung in kitchens long destroyed. Wojtek, too, carries memory. The long road from Persia, the laughter of tents, the warmth of human touch. Hours pass. The mountain becomes a labyrinth of smoke and cries. The bear continues his task, a rhythm of movement and purpose amid disorder. Men watch him and find courage. If the bear can keep going, so can we, one whispers, his voice breaking. At times, Wojtek pauses beside the fallen. He nudges them softly, as if to wake them. When they do not stir, he lowers his head, then moves on. No one teaches him ceremony, but he performs it all the same. The battle stretches into night. Rain begins to fall, fine, cold, merciless. The slopes turn to mud, the men slip and curse and cling to what little light remains. Flashes from explosions paint the world in brief, brutal color. In one such flash, Wojtek stands illuminated, upright amid the smoke, a shell in his paws, his fur streaked with ash. To those who see him, it is an image they will never forget, the soldier bear walking through fire beside men. In the command tent, officers speak in hushed disbelief. Reports come in. The bear's carrying ammunition again. He's keeping pace with the men. Someone writes it down, though it sounds like myth. War has little room for poetry, but sometimes Poetry insists on being true. By dawn, the rain stops. The mountain is silent except for the distant sound of boots on broken stone. The Polish flag rises over the monastery ruins, white and red against the pale sky. For the first time in years, these men, once citizens of a country erased from maps, plant their flag on European soil. A small victory in a vast war, yet to them, it feels like resurrection. The men cheer, exhausted and hoarse. Some weep. Wojtek stands beside them, sniffing the air heavy with smoke and dawn. His fur is damp. His eyes reflect the pale light. A soldier drapes a tattered Polish flag across his back for a photograph, not as decoration, but as gratitude. The camera clicks. The moment freezes in time, a bear among soldiers, unity made flesh. Later, as the sun climbs, the aftermath unfolds. The monastery is rubble, the slopes littered with remnants of men and metal. Chaplains walk among the wounded, murmuring prayers that rise and fall like the wind. Wojtek rests beside the gun crews, head lowered, breathing slow. He has done his part, carried what was needed, endured what was asked. Around him, silence grows, fragile and holy. One soldier sits beside him, hands trembling around a cigarette. "You know, Wojtek," he whispers, "they'll tell stories about you. They'll say you fought like a man." The bear blinks, uninterested in legend. He leans closer, nudging the soldier's arm until the man smiles faintly. All right," he mutters. "You fought like yourself. That's better." In the days that follow, word spreads through Allied lines. A bear helped take Monte Cassino. Some laugh at the tale, others swear it's true. But for the men who saw him, who felt his quiet steadiness when the world burned, there is no doubt. Wojtek's courage was not in violence, but in presence, the calm heart of something uncorrupted moving through chaos. At night, as they camp in the shadow of the ruined monastery, the men gather around fires. They sing softly, their voices thin but unwavering. Wojtek lies among them, lulled by the murmur of familiar tones. For the first time in years, they are close to home, not in geography, but in spirit. The chaplain walks past, pauses, and looks at the sleeping bear. God works in mysterious ways, he murmurs, half to himself, perhaps even through paws and fur. No one argues. As the stars appear, faint pinpricks over a blackened sky, the mountain exhales. The dead rest, the living dream of meadows and families, of letters yet unwritten. Somewhere, deep in his sleep, Wojtek stirs. Perhaps he dreams, too, of tents in the desert, of hands offering fruit, of laughter in languages he doesn't need to understand. The legend of the soldier bear is born not in parades or headlines, but in the hearts of wary men who found light in his strength. Years later, they will tell their children, "We fought with a bear at Cassino. He carried shells, but also our hope." And though time will turn the story to myth, the truth will remain. That in one of the darkest battles of the war, gentleness walked beside courage, and both survived. The guns fall silent, yet their echoes linger among the stones of Cassino. In that hush, the soldiers learn that victory carries a quiet sorrow, the ache of survival. And as they descend the mountain, Wojtek walks with them still, his shadow long against the dawn, toward a peace that does not yet know their names. Dawn arrives not as a blessing, but as an exhausted sigh. The sky over Monte Cassino blushes with smoke and new light, pale and tender above the wounds of the earth. The wind that crosses the valley carries the scent of brick dust and cordite. The perfume of victory, if victory can be said to have a scent at all. All night, the Polish troops had climbed the ravaged hills, step by step, through mud and fire. Now they stand upon the summit, where once monks sang hymns in the quiet hours of prayer. The monastery is no longer a place of peace. It is a broken crown upon a bleeding hill. They raise their flag, white and red against the grey. A ragged cheer spreads, but it does not last. The sound falters like a voice uncertain of its own joy. Many stand silent, caps in hand, eyes fixed upon the ruins, as if waiting for some greater sign. Perhaps a whisper of meaning, or forgiveness from the dead. Wojtek stands among them. His fur is matted with dust, his paws blackened with earth and oil. The bear's broad shoulders rise and fall with each breath. Around him, the soldiers move slowly, reverently. Some laugh, a little too loudly, trying to make the moment lighter than it feels. Others sit on the steps that once led to the monastery gates, now nothing more than splintered stones. The wind stirs again. From below, a faint murmur of battle continues. The world has not yet ended its chaos. But here, atop this ruin, there is only stillness. A young soldier named Janik kneels beside a fallen wall, tracing the faint outline of a fresco half buried in dust. Once, it must have shown a saint or an angel. Now, only the curve of a wing remains. "We destroyed heaven to climb into it," he murmurs. No one answers. There is nothing to say. Wojtek sniffs near him, his great nose brushing over the fragments. He seems to be searching for food, perhaps, or the familiar scent of a comrade. He lets out a low rumble, deep and mournful, and turns away. His amber eyes rest on the distant valley, where columns of smoke still rise like ghosts. The men love him for his strength, for the strange comfort of his presence. Something simple, honest, and alive among so much death. Yet in this moment, Wojtek feels almost human in his sorrow. He lowers himself to the ground and sits, his great body still, his gaze unfocused. Around him, the monastery crumbles in slow silence. The chaplain walks among the men, his voice low as he recites a prayer for the fallen. His hands tremble as he blesses the ruins. "For those who fell on these stones," he says, "and for those who will never find their way home." The men bow their heads. Some cross themselves, others simply stare. In that silence, memories flood back. The faces of friends lost in the long climb, the laughter around makeshift fires, the songs sung before dawn. War compresses time, turns years into moments, lives into names carved on wooden crosses. They will remember Monte Cassino as victory, but it feels instead like an ending. Down the slope, a few soldiers begin to clear debris. They uncover scraps of paper, pages of an old Bible, singed at the edges. One page remains legible. "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." Someone reads the words aloud, and for a moment the air seems to still. Wojtek lifts his head. A bell from somewhere below the valley tolls faintly, cracked, uneven, but still ringing. The sound carries through the smoke, a fragile note of continuity. Later, when rations are distributed, Wojtek receives his own portion. A can of condensed milk, opened and handed to him like a sacred offering. He drinks it slowly, his tongue scraping the metal, eyes half closed. Around him, the men watch, their laughter soft and tired. "Our comrade," one says, "our good bear." In that fragile laughter, something human stirs, not triumph, but tenderness. Wojtek has carried their shells, shared their danger, and stood beside them in the storm. In him, they see not a beast of war, but a reflection of their own endurance. Their need to believe that gentleness can survive even here. The sun climbs higher. The monastery glows faintly, its stones warming in the light. Yet the beauty feels cruel. The kind of beauty that comes only after too much loss. One man begins to hum a Polish lullaby, the kind sung to children in a quieter world. Others join in, their voices low and cracked. Wojtek listens, head tilted, as if trying to remember a melody he has never truly known. For hours they linger, reluctant to leave. The flag flutters above them, bright against the ruin. Below, Allied troops advance. The war rolls forward like a slow tide, indifferent to what it leaves behind. When at last the order comes to move, the men rise quietly. They shoulder their packs, check their weapons, and descend the hill one by one. Wojtek follows, his great form swaying with weary grace. He pauses once to look back at the shattered monastery, the smoke, the flag still trembling in the wind. Perhaps he understands, in his own way, that they will not return. That even if the war should end tomorrow, the world they left behind will never again be whole. The path downward is steep and silent. Stones shift beneath their boots. The air grows cooler, the scent of smoke fading into the sharper smell of pine and wet soil. Below, trucks wait to carry them onward. Wojtek climbs into one, sitting beside his handler, who scratches behind his ear. The bear leans his heavy head against the man's shoulder, and for a brief moment it feels like peace. But peace, like victory, is a fragile thing, easily broken, often imagined. The road stretches on, winding through fields that once were homes, past walls pocked with bullets, past trees scorched black by fire. Behind them, Monte Cassino stands, not as a triumph, but as a monument to endurance. And as the convoy moves forward, one soldier turns to another and whispers, "If this is victory, I wonder what peace will ask of us." Somewhere ahead, the war still waits. Another hill, another dawn. And somewhere behind, in the ruins of a monastery, a bear's paw print fades slowly in the dust. A quiet reminder that even in victory, the heart longs for home. The war does not end all at once. It thins, like smoke unraveling across a morning sky. One front quiets, another stirs. The soldiers of Anders' army, the Polish Second Corps, linger in the uncertain silence between battles, listening to rumors of peace that sound as fragile as birdsong. Monte Cassino lies behind them now. The monastery stands again in their minds, not in stone, but in memory. Ahead stretches Europe, scarred, divided, trying to remember what life without the drum of artillery sounds like. The convoys roll northward through Italy, through valleys where the grass dares once more to grow. Fields glimmer faintly with dew, though beneath the soil, shells still sleep. Wojtek rides in the back of a truck, head lifted to the wind, eyes half closed, as if tasting freedom. Around him, the soldiers hum old songs. The melodies are slower now, lullabies rather than marches. At each village, children run to see the bear. They have heard stories of the Polish soldiers and their strange comrade. Wojtek never disappoints. He stands on his hind legs, waves a paw, and sometimes salutes when told, drawing laughter from men who had forgotten how to laugh. The people offer bread, apples, and sometimes bottles of beer. Wojtek accepts them all with solemn dignity, as though these small gestures are sacred tributes. He drinks from the bottle, tilts his head back, and lets out a satisfied huff that ripples into a growl of delight. The soldiers cheer. For a moment, joy feels possible again, but when the cheers fade, silence returns, heavy and private. For though the war has ended for some, the Polish men have no home to return to. Their country, liberated from the Nazis, has been handed to the Soviets. Their families' fates are uncertain, their villages renamed, their futures rewritten without them. They march onward, but the road feels like exile. Wojtek does not know this, of course. He only feels the thinning of his circle. Some men are reassigned, some are discharged, heading to displaced person camps or distant farms. Each departure leaves a gap. He notices. He sniffs for them at dawn, looks around at night when the campfire burns low. He does not understand where his brothers go, only that the nights grow quieter. In the Allied camps across Europe, Wojtek becomes a legend. Newspapers print his photograph. The soldier bear of Monte Cassino. Reporters describe him as a mascot, a miracle, a symbol of bravery. Children send letters addressed to Corporal Wojtek. Soldiers from other units come to see him wrestle. Great, playful matches in which he stands tall, his enormous arms wrapping gently around laughing men who always lose, gladly. The laughter spreads, but underneath it lies a hollow ache. Fame feels like a metal pin to an old wound. It glitters, but it cannot heal. At night, in the flickering lamplight of the tents, the men tell stories. They speak of home, of rivers and birch forests, of bread baked by their mothers, of Christmases before the world fractured. Wojtek lies among them, snout resting on folded paws, eyes half closed. Sometimes he reaches out a paw, heavy and warm, to touch a soldier's boot or hand. It feels like a promise, silent, instinctive, that they are still together. In Belgium, Wojtek meets Scottish troops for the first time. They love him instantly. One offers him a tartan scarf. Another teaches him to shake hands in the Highland way. Wojtek learns quickly, earning roars of laughter. A British general visits, astonished by the sight of a bear saluting in uniform. "He's better disciplined than half my men," he jokes. The soldiers grin, but their smiles tremble at the edges, because they know this is not forever. One evening, as the unit stops near a quiet river, the men wash their faces in the cool water. The war is behind them, but the habit of silence remains. Wojtek wades into the shallows, splashing like a child, then sits in the current, eyes distant. His reflection ripples. A soldier, a bear, a creature between worlds. The campfire that night burns low. The talk turns to what will come next. Some say Britain will take them in. Others dream of returning east, though they know the borders have changed. "We fought for freedom," Janik murmurs, staring into the flames. "But not our own." Wojtek lifts his head, watching the fire's glow dance across their faces. He senses their unease. He shifts closer, pressing his bulk against the nearest man, offering warmth the way he always has. Wordless, immense, loyal. The soldiers fall asleep one by one, their murmured hopes trailing into dreams. The bear stays awake, blinking at the night sky. Perhaps he, too, dreams of home, though he has known many homes and lost them all to war. The road north continues, through France, past the wreckage of bridges and rail lines, past towns where church bells ring again for the first time in years. Spring unfolds gently, and Europe begins to remember the language of flowers. Yet the Poles move like ghosts through it, free but unrooted. At a transit camp in southern Scotland, they finally stop. The green hills roll out before them, soft and endless. The air smells of rain and earth, a new kind of silence, not born of loss, but of waiting. Wojtek steps down from the truck and sniffs the wind. Sheep graze in the distance. A lark rises, singing. This, perhaps, could be peace. The British officers greet the Polish unit with respect. They admire Wojtek, whose reputation precedes him. Children gather at the fences to glimpse the famous bear. Farmers offer honey, and the men are given new uniforms. Lighter, cleaner, but strange upon their shoulders. In the weeks that follow, life begins to settle into rhythm. Training gives way to routine. The soldiers help rebuild farms, dig roads, teach English children polish songs. Wojtek joins them in every task, lugging logs, rolling barrels, playing tug-of-war with ropes. He is loved everywhere he goes. And yet, as the months pass, something changes. The war has ended, but the army begins to dissolve. Some men choose to stay in Britain. Others leave for Canada or Australia. Wojtek watches them go, one by one. Each departure feels like a quiet door closing somewhere in the heart. By late autumn, the once lively camp is half empty. The laughter has grown faint. Wojtek still walks the fences each morning, sniffing the air as if searching for a familiar scent. The world grows larger, but his circle smaller. He does not understand why home keeps moving farther away. Soon, the unit that carried him through fire and triumph will disband, scattered across foreign lands. And Wojtek, the soldier bear of Monte Cassino, will take one more journey, not toward battle, but toward memory itself. The war has ended, but the rhythm of marching remains in the soldiers' bones. When they arrive in Scotland, the land feels both strange and familiar, foreign yet kind in its greenness. The hills roll like distant memories of Poland, and the wind carries the same cold sweetness that once brushed across the Vistula. They come to Winfield Camp in Berwickshire, where the grass grows thick and wet and the mornings are shrouded in fog. There are barracks, timber huts, a few barns, and a quiet road that winds through the fields. It is not home, but it will do. Wojtek steps off the truck and sniffs the air. Rain drizzles softly, dampening his fur. He stands for a moment, unmoving, as if testing the scent of this new world. The loam, the pine, the faint trace of salt from the northern sea. Behind him, the soldiers watch with something like reverence. This is the bear who once carried ammunition under fire, who marched beside them through deserts and mountains, who saluted officers and wrestled laughter back into their lives. Now, they must build him a fence. They gather wood, hammer nails, and shape a small enclosure near the edge of the camp, beside a patch of trees. The fence is sturdy, but low enough that he can see beyond it. Inside, they place his barrel, a few logs to climb, and a hollow where he can rest. When they finish, Wojtek wanders in without hesitation, sniffs around, and sits, watching the men with steady eyes. He seems to understand. The soldiers visit him every day. They bring fruit, biscuits, and bottles of beer. They talk to him in Polish, their voices softened by memory. Jak się masz, Wojtku? How are you, little one? They say, though he is anything but little now. He responds with grunts, soft and curious, sometimes standing on two legs to greet them. To the Scottish villagers nearby, it is a marvel. A real bear living among Polish soldiers. Children come to see him, standing by the fence with wide eyes. The soldiers smile and tell them stories. How he carried shells at Monte Cassino, how he wrestled for fun, how he loved cigarettes but never lit them. Wojtek enjoys the attention, sometimes playfully tugging at their caps through the fence, sometimes bowing his great head for pats. Life takes on a quiet rhythm. Days unfold like rain, steady, unhurried. The men work, repair roads, plant gardens. They teach Polish songs to local schoolchildren and help rebuild nearby farms. The war feels distant now, though it lingers in the spaces between sentences, in the pauses before laughter. At night, the camp glows with lamplight. The soldiers gather near the stove, playing cards, writing letters they have nowhere to send. They drink slowly, remembering comrades who fell far from here. Outside, Wojtek moves through the grass, his breath misting in the cold air. Sometimes, he sits and listens to their voices drifting through the walls. That soft rhythm of belonging that has followed him since Persia. But time, as always, begins to thin the edges of their circle. One by one, the men start to leave. Some find work in nearby towns, carpenters, drivers, labourers. Some marry local women. Some emigrate to Canada or Australia, seeking a life not haunted by borders. The barracks grow emptier. The laughter becomes an echo. Wojtek notices. Each morning, he looks toward the gate, expecting the familiar footsteps, the cheerful greetings. When they don't come, he waits. His great head droops slightly, his movements slower. Yet when one of his old brothers returns, even for a short visit, his joy bursts forth in unmistakable ways. A growl of welcome, a rush to the fence, a paw resting on a man's shoulder. In those moments, the past seems to live again. The local Scots grow fond of him too. Farmers bring honeycombs. Children toss apples from across the wire. They call him the Polish bear or simply the gentle giant. For a creature once born wild in the mountains of Persia, Wojtek becomes an emblem of peace. Of how even in exile, kinship can take root. Years pass. The war drifts further into history and new seasons wash over Winfield Camp. The wooden fences darken with rain. Moss creeps over the barracks. Grass grows tall where boots once stamped in unison. The soldiers who remain grow older, slower. Some move to Edinburgh or Glasgow. Others, too wary to leave, stay near the camp, visiting their friend each week. Wojtek grows older too. His muzzle whitens, and he spends long hours resting in the sun, gazing toward the fields. He no longer wrestles, but still perks up when he hears familiar Polish voices. The men bring him treats, tell him jokes, and stroke the fur between his ears. Sometimes they sing, soft songs like prayers whispered into the wind. Wojtek closes his eyes as if listening, the same way he did by the fires of Monte Cassino. In their songs, the men remember what was lost and what was found. They remember a world that burned and a bear who walked through it beside them. By the mid-1950s, the army disbands entirely. Wojtek's remaining caretakers find new homes and jobs across Britain. They make sure he will be cared for by people who understand what he meant. Eventually, arrangements are made with the Edinburgh Zoo, where he can live among other animals, tended and safe. The day they come to move him, the air feels heavy with rain. The truck idles near the gate. The soldiers, older now, greyer, stand in silence. Wojtek hesitates, sniffing the air. One of the men pats his side gently. "Come, old friend," he whispers in Polish. "It's time." Wojtek looks at him, eyes deep as memory. Then, with a low grunt, he climbs onto the truck. The men follow him for a while, until the road curves, and he disappears beyond the hill. The camp is quiet again. Only the wind moves through the empty huts, carrying faint echoes of laughter and song. Scotland keeps its green silence, kind, patient, and eternal, and somewhere beyond the mist, a bear rides toward another home. In Edinburgh, new fences will rise, and new faces will greet him. Strangers who will never know the weight of his story. But for those who marched beside him, Wojtek will never truly leave the camp. He will live forever in the sound of rain on Scottish grass and in the hearts of men who once called a bear their brother. Morning in Edinburgh is quiet. Mist drifts over the rooftops like breath upon glass, and the zoo awakens slowly. The distant chatter of birds, the creak of a gate, the low hum of a city learning peace again. Among the enclosures, there is one that seems strangely still. Behind the bars, a brown bear sits upright, his eyes calm and watchful. His name, the keepers say, is Wojtek. To most who come, he is a curiosity, a relic of wartime rumor turned real. The soldier bear, they whisper, handing coins to children who peer between the rails. But to those who once marched beside him through dust, smoke, and exile, he is more than legend. He is memory given form, fur and breath bound to a story the world is already forgetting. The Polish camp at Winfield has closed. The laughter that once filled the air, men calling his name, boots thudding against the Scottish soil, has faded into memory. The soldiers have scattered, some to new jobs in Britain, others to homes that no longer exist on maps. Their uniforms, once symbols of unity, are folded away in drawers. But in a corner of the zoo, Wojtek still stands as if waiting for the next roll call. He has grown heavier, slower. His fur, once brushed by desert winds and Mediterranean salt, now glistens with Scottish rain. He eats well. Bread, fruit, sometimes chocolate brought by kind visitors. But there is a certain quiet in him that no food can fill. The keepers say he is gentle, more like a retired worker than a beast. He raises his paw when they approach, as though saluting. Sometimes he paces the edge of his enclosure with a soldier's rhythm, steady, measured, purposeful. Then, as if remembering himself, he stops and sits, gazing past the bars into the grey distance where the hills fade into sky. No one knows what he dreams. Perhaps of tents and laughter, of songs around campfires in Persia, of the scent of tobacco and oil and old leather. Or perhaps his mind holds nothing but the simple ache of familiarity lost, the rhythm of footsteps that once matched his own. There are stories of visitors who spoke Polish to him. When they did, his ears would twitch, his head lift sharply. He would rise on his hind legs, searching the crowd with soft urgency. To those who saw it, the moment was unforgettable, as though the years had fallen away and the bear remembered everything. The taste of war, the faces of brothers, the sound of home carried in a word. Some of the old soldiers visit from time to time. They stand quietly by the fence, caps in hand, speaking softly. Wojtek, stary przyjaciel, they say, old friend. Their voices tremble, for they know he recognizes them, even through the fog of years. Sometimes he presses his great paw against the bars, and they reach back, palm to paw. A gesture that needs no translation. One man, now grey and stooped, once whispered, "You carried our shells, and we carried your story." Tears caught in his throat, and for a moment the zoo fell silent. Even the children seemed to understand something sacred was passing between them. The kind of understanding that does not need words. The newspapers call him a celebrity. Children send letters to the zoo addressed to Wojtek, the soldier bear. Reporters write about his wartime feats. The bear who drank beer, who wrestled with soldiers, who carried ammunition through hell. But fame is a strange kind of solitude. Behind the attention lies a life of stillness, of days that blur into one another. When the crowds leave, Wojtek sits quietly, gazing at the fading light. Sometimes the keepers say he hums, a low, steady sound like the distant roll of thunder, or perhaps the echo of a marching song he once heard in the desert. It is not joy or sorrow exactly, but something between the two. The sound of memory breathing. The world outside his cage changes swiftly. Nations rebuild. Children grow up never knowing what the war took. For them, the bear behind the bars is just an animal with a curious story. Yet for those who remember, he is the last living bridge between what was and what could have been. One winter evening, snow begins to fall. Soft, patient flakes drifting down upon the zoo. Wojtek lifts his head and watches them melt on his fur. He has seen many kinds of weather: Persian heat, Egyptian sandstorms, Italian rain. But snow is the touch of home. Somewhere deep inside him, a feeling stirs, something ancient and wordless. For a moment, his breath clouds the cold air like smoke rising from the fields of Poland. The keepers notice that he grows quieter each year. He still greets visitors, still lifts his paw in that soldier's salute, but his eyes carry a faraway calm, as though he stands already halfway between worlds. Perhaps he understands, in some instinctive way, that he is the last of his kind, not by species, but by story. When the gates close each night and darkness settles over Edinburgh, the city hums faintly in the distance. Inside his enclosure, Wojtek lies down upon the straw, curling into himself. The moonlight slips between the bars, painting stripes of silver across his fur. Somewhere beyond the city, ships creak in harbour, and wind passes through old pine trees, a sound like voices calling softly from long ago. In those hours, time folds upon itself. The bear who once walked through battlefields now dreams of quiet things. The warmth of hands upon his neck, the taste of sweet milk, the low laughter of men who have become ghosts. The war is long over, but in him it still breathes, not in fear or violence, but in tenderness remembered. Visitors who pass by in the morning sometimes say they see him sitting upright, facing the dawn as though waiting for someone. Perhaps he is. Perhaps he always will be. For though the world moves on, Wojtek remains, not behind bars, but in the gentle echo of every story told about him. Each telling opens the gate a little wider, letting him walk once more among his brothers. And in that way, he is never truly caged. Somewhere in the heart of Edinburgh, the soldier bear grows still, his silence heavy with remembrance. Yet memory, like bronze, endures, waiting to rise again in the next chapter, where statues will stand and stories will take shape, honouring the friendship that outlived war. There are mornings when the mist over Edinburgh seems thicker than memory itself. It clings to the trees, the fences, and the quiet pathways of the zoo, where Wojtek still sits in his corner, slower now, heavier, but still dignified. His fur, once the deep bronze of desert earth, carries the colour of winter straw. When the keepers call his name, he turns his head with gentle effort, his movements measured by years rather than instinct. The crowds that once gathered in awe are smaller now. New wars, new heroes, new distractions fill the headlines. Yet sometimes, on quiet afternoons, an old man appears at the fence, cap in hand, coat buttoned against the chill. He stands there for a while, saying little. The bear looks up, nostrils flaring softly as though catching the faint scent of an old story. Then, as if recognizing something beyond sight, Wojtek lifts his paw. The man salutes in return, and for a moment, the world folds upon itself, time no longer linear, but circular, tender, eternal. The soldiers who once called him comrade are aging too. Their hair has turned to snow, their medals lie forgotten in drawers. Some have passed quietly, buried under headstones etched with names of places where few now walk. Tobruk, Monte Cassino, Bologna. Their children hear only fragments of their stories. Murmured names, half-remembered laughter, a photograph of a bear in uniform tucked inside a Bible. For them, Wojtek becomes not a companion but a myth, something too wondrous to be true, too gentle to belong to war. But those who knew him, truly knew him, feel a pang when they read his name in the paper or hear a stranger's tale told with amusement. For they remember what the stories cannot carry: the warmth of his fur against the night chill, the way his snuffling comforted men who could not cry, the unspoken bond that outlasted orders and flags. As the years pass, Wojtek's world shrinks to the quiet enclosure and the rhythm of routine. He eats, rests, and sits by the fence, watching visitors who come and go like seasons. The keepers grow fond of him. They say he seems to understand loneliness. When the zoo closes each evening, he watches the gates long after the last footsteps fade, as though expecting someone to return. Winter deepens. Snow gathers in the corners of his pen, white against the dark soil. The cold makes his joints ache, but he does not complain. Bears are not made for complaint, only endurance. Sometimes, in his sleep, he moves his paws as if marching still, the faint growl in his throat echoing a song once sung by soldiers far away. By 1963, his strength begins to fade. The keepers notice he no longer rises to greet them. His breathing is slower, his eyes duller. They bring him apples, his favorite, but he only sniffs them and turns away. They understand. Every creature, no matter how storied, reaches a moment when even memory grows heavy. News spreads quietly when he dies. There are no trumpets, no parades. The morning paper carries a short piece beneath the headlines. Wojtek, the bear who went to war, dies at Edinburgh Zoo. The words are simple, unadorned, as if history itself is bowing its head. Readers smile softly at the tale, remembering a time when kindness still found its way through chaos. Children cut out the article and paste it in scrapbooks. Old men fold it carefully, as one folds a letter from the front. Among the dwindling ranks of the Polish veterans, silence follows the news like a shadow. In pubs and meeting halls, they raise their glasses. Not to victory, not to nations, but to a friend. Some cry quietly, their tears lost in the foam. Others sit staring at the wall, seeing instead a young bear cub in Persia, clumsy and curious, reaching for a tin of condensed milk. The world moves on, as it always does. Yet something of Wojtek lingers in the quiet corners. In the rustle of leaves near the zoo, in the soft paw prints of snow, in the way old soldiers pause when they hear the word casino. He becomes not a story of war, but of what remains when war has ended. The faint warmth of loyalty, the echo of laughter, the endurance of love beyond language. Years later, a young woman visiting the zoo with her grandfather asks about the empty space where a bear once lived. The keeper tells her the story of soldiers, exile, and a bear who carried shells. The grandfather nods silently, eyes bright with memory. He was a boy when the soldiers came through his village, he says. He remembers their songs. He remembers their kindness. And though he never saw the bear himself, he feels as though he has known him all his life. History has a way of softening at the edges, turning pain into poetry. Wojtek's life becomes such a poem, each verse written by those who loved him, each telling preserving not his might, but his gentleness. His story is retold in schools, in books, in hushed conversations between generations. With each retelling, The war feels farther away, but the tenderness closer. And somewhere, beyond the measure of time, the bear keeps walking, not on roads of earth or asphalt, but across the fields of memory, where the soldiers of the Second Corps march beside him still. In that place, there are no fences, only open sky, laughter, and the distant scent of home carried on the wind. In Edinburgh, the seasons continue to turn. The zoo's paths fill with new faces, new creatures, new lives. Yet now and then, someone pauses by a certain quiet corner where the ground feels charged with presence. They do not know why they linger, but they feel it, the unseen weight of remembrance, the warmth of something that once lived there and still somehow does. Because some stories never truly end. They simply fade gently, like embers cooling after the fire, glowing softly in the dark. And when the night closes in over the city, perhaps a faint rustle moves through the mist, the sound of a great paw against the earth, the echo of footsteps marching beside it. Time softens, but memory does not vanish. From Wojtek's quiet passing will rise bronze and story, the monuments of fur and faith that keep his spirit walking among us still. Morning light spills across Krakow's city square, soft and golden. The bells of St. Mary's Basilica echo through the air, mingling with the chatter of tourists and the faint clip of hooves on cobblestones. Amid the rhythm of the living world, a statue stands, a bear mid-stride, his paw lifted as though saluting the passing day. Children laugh as they climb his bronze back. They do not know his name, not yet, but the mothers and fathers watching from the benches do. Their eyes linger a moment longer, filled with something quieter than pride, a feeling that belongs to memory itself. Wojtek has come home. Not in body, but in bronze. It begins in Krakow, in the land the soldiers once dreamed of returning to. Decades after his death, artists and veterans gather to design a monument. They do not want a bear of ferocity or fame, but one of gentleness. A soldier not of violence, but of care. The sculptor studies old photographs, Wojtek lifting an artillery shell, sitting beside a tent, nuzzling a soldier's face. From those images, he shapes not an icon of war, but a companion of men, strong, watchful, humble. When the statue is unveiled, the crowd falls silent. The Polish flag drapes across its shoulders before being drawn away like a curtain of time. There he stands, the bear who carried ammunition, the bear who carried hearts. Applause ripples like wind through wheat fields. For a moment, the years collapse, the 1940s returning in whispers of song and story. An old veteran steps forward. His hand trembles as he touches the bronze fur. "We were young," he murmurs, eyes moist, "and he made us believe we were still human." Around him, others nod, grey-haired men in neat coats, the last living witnesses of a strange, beautiful friendship. Cameras click, reporters write, but none of them can capture the quiet ache beneath the pride. From Krakow, the story travels outward. In Edinburgh, near Prince's Street Gardens, another statue rises. This one shows Wojtek with a Polish soldier walking beside him, their strides matching. Man and bear equals in motion. The pair face north, toward memories and away from war. The inscription is simple. They fought together. They lived together. On the day of its unveiling, Scottish children press close to see. A drizzle falls, glinting off the bronze like tears turn to light. A choir sings softly, Polish voices blending with Scottish ones. Two nations bound by one improbable legend. A woman lays a wreath of red poppies at the base. For a moment, the city stills, and the bear seems alive again, breathing in the damp air, ready to march once more. In London, too, he stands, in a small garden where veterans gather to remember the exiles of the Polish II Corps. The statue there is smaller, humbler, as if carved not for grandeur but for intimacy, a place where one can sit, reflect, and understand that even in the machinery of war there was room for something purely innocent, a symbol that humanity, even wounded, could still choose tenderness. The monuments multiply, not in competition, but in communion. Each bears the same gentle defiance that compassion deserves to be remembered as fiercely as victory. The sculptors say it is difficult to capture the spirit of a creature like Wojtek. The softness of his eyes, the strength beneath. Bronze is cold, they say, but somehow, when cast in his image, it feels warm. Visitors leave small offerings at the feet of these statues, pebbles, coins, sometimes a teddy bear. Children touch the paws and giggle, unaware that those same paws once lifted shells heavier than their small bodies. Parents explain in simple words, he was a real bear, he helped soldiers in the war. The children nod, wide-eyed. For them, the war is ancient myth, but the idea of a bear helping men, that they can understand. And so, Wojtek's story renews itself in laughter. The laughter that once echoed through camps in Persia and Italy now leaves again on city streets and playgrounds. History softens its edges through retelling, becoming something gentler, not tragedy, but testament. The veterans who remain know this. They visit the statues when they can, their steps slower now, their numbers fewer each year. They speak quietly in Polish, telling the bear things no one else would understand. They thank him. They apologize. They promise not to let him fade. At night, when the cities sleep, perhaps the statues dream too. Perhaps, in the silence between midnight and dawn, the bronze paws shift ever so slightly. The heads tilt toward distant memories, the sound of boots in desert sand, the clink of tin cups, the soft murmur of men singing to keep the dark away. Through these monuments, Wojtek has become more than a bear. He is the embodiment of something rare, a faith in decency even when the world has lost it. Each statue is a sermon in metal, preaching not with words but with presence. That kindness is not weakness, and that friendship can outlast fire. The world that builds monuments does so to remember, but also to confess. These sculptures are not altars to glory, but apologies to innocence. In every bronze curve lies an acknowledgement that amid chaos, something pure once walked beside man, unafraid and uncorrupted. In Krakow, when dusk falls and the city lights flicker on, pigeons rest upon Wojtek's back. The bronze glows softly under the street lamps. Passers-by pause, some without knowing why. There is something calming about him. The stillness, the strength, the quiet dignity. He seems to be listening still, as though waiting for a voice from long ago to call his name. The bear who once marched through war now stands in peace, his story rooted in 3 nations. Poland, Scotland, and the shared soil of humanity. Through stone and story, through laughter and prayer, he lives again. For those who seek him, he is there. In bronze, in books, in the gentle pause of a passerby who senses that something once beautiful has not been lost, only transformed. And somewhere beneath the weight of bronze, the warmth of memory still stirs, waiting for the next breath of history to bring it alive again. For even monuments, like stories, are only echoes, and in those echoes, compassion continues to speak. History is loud, It remembers the thunder of cannons, the speeches of generals, the iron clatter of nations grinding against one another. It carves its memory into stone and celebrates the victors, leaving the quiet acts, the kindnesses that sustained the broken, to fade like morning mist. But every so often, through the fractures of that noise, a softer story survives, one that hums rather than shouts, one that smells not of gunpowder, but of earth, of bread, of fur warmed by the sun. Wojtek's story is one such echo, a gentle vibration in the long, cold corridors of history. He was never meant for it, for fame, for remembrance. He was a bear who stumbled into humanity's war, who learned the gestures of men because he was loved by them. But through him, something unspoken found its form, the proof that even in war, tenderness is not extinguished. Across Europe, his name is murmured in classrooms and whispered in memorial halls. Yet the power of his tale lies not in his strength, not in the way he lifted crates of ammunition as though they were twigs, but in the way he bridged what should have been impossible. He turned fear into fondness. He made soldiers, hardened by exile and death, remember how to laugh again. In the trenches, men spoke of him as if he were one of their own. Corporal Wojtek, they said, half in jest, half in reverence. He had a service number, a rank, a place in the unit. But behind the titles lay something deeper, an unspoken understanding that the bear represented their better selves. For the Polish soldiers scattered from their homeland, he became a symbol of innocence, a fragment of home carried into the inferno. His brown eyes, wide and curious, seemed to look at the world without judgment. In them, the men saw the reflection of a gentler life, one not yet spoiled by the machinery of war. To feed him, to care for him, to march beside him, it was to reclaim a small part of the human soul that war tried so hard to erase. Sometimes, history is less about what happened and more about what refused to die. Wojtek's story refused to die. After the war, as nations redrew their borders and soldiers scattered across continents, his memory lingered like the faint scent of pine on an old coat. Veterans carried photographs of him folded inside letters. Some told their children bedtime stories, not of generals, but of a bear who drank beer and saluted officers. In Polish communities across Britain, his name became a shorthand for something sacred. Czułość, tenderness. Because tenderness, in their eyes, was the greatest form of courage. As the decades passed, the world built new monuments to the old wars. Marble soldiers stood in silent ranks, eternal flames burned beside wreaths of steel. Yet beside these solemn testaments, Wojtek's statues appeared too, playful, human, warm, a bear cast in bronze, mid-stride, mouth open as if calling for his comrades. Children climbed onto his back, pigeons perched on his paws. And for a moment, history smiled. In the museums where his story is told, a photograph often stands beside his uniformed likeness. Wojtek, sitting upright, paws resting on a soldier's shoulders. The man laughs. The kind of laughter that comes from relief, from the temporary forgetting of all that hurts. Behind them, tents ripple in the desert wind. That single image carries more than words could. It says, "We were still capable of love." It says, "Even here, in this landscape of dust and loss, kindness found us." Such moments are small, and because they are small, they endure. The world changes. Governments rise and fall. Alliances crumble. Weapons evolve. But the simple act of caring for another being, against all logic and despair, remains timeless. In the final years of his life, Wojtek grew quieter. From his enclosure at Edinburgh Zoo, he would sometimes stand at the sound of Polish voices, a gesture not of habit, but of recognition. Like a note remembered from an old song, he searched the crowd as if looking for familiar faces. Perhaps in his mind, he saw them still. The soldiers who had fed him oranges, who had marched beside him through mountains and smoke. When visitors laughed and threw treats, they saw a bear. But for those few veterans who visited, leaning on canes, they saw a comrade. And perhaps that was the final echo, that love, once given, does not vanish when its source is gone. It transforms like light filtered through memory, becoming something gentler, softer, but no less real. Wojtek's story was never truly about war. It was about what war could not destroy. It was about the strange, sacred resilience of kindness, how it bends but never breaks. Now, when his name is spoken, it does not ring with triumph, but with tenderness. Teachers tell their students about the soldier bear, and in the retelling, they do something extraordinary. They teach that courage is not only in battle, but in care. They remind a generation that even in the bloodiest chapters of history, love was present, stubborn as wild grass growing between ruins. Somewhere in the hush between memory and myth, Wojtek still walks, not on battlefields, but through the hearts of those who hear his story. He carries no ammunition now, only the weight of remembrance. The men who once marched with him are gone, their voices scattered across time. But their laughter, the laughter that rose from trenches and trucks when the bear lifted a crate or stole a helmet, still lingers like the scent of smoke after rain. That laughter, that affection, that impossible friendship, these are the echoes that history cannot silence. Because in the end, it is not the war we remember most. It is the kindness that outlived it. And so, as history fades into legend, Wojtek's story remains, a quiet testament that love, once shared, never truly ends. And so, the candle of that night burns quietly in time. Its flame wavers, not from wind, but from the sigh of memory, the story of a gentle soldier and the bear who walked beside him. Together, they carried more than ammunition. They carried the fragile weight of hope through the ruins of a broken world. Even now, their footsteps linger, soft impressions in the dust of history, where friendship proved stronger than fear and laughter outlasted the thunder of guns. These are not just stories of war, but of the small, shining acts that make us human. A paw resting on a soldier's shoulder, a smile in the shadow of despair. Thank you for walking this quiet road with me tonight, for sharing this hour of stillness where the past breathes softly again. In this little corner of the world, between your heartbeat and the hush of night, the echoes of their kindness leave on, passed from soul to soul like a whispered lullaby through time. As you rest, let go of the day's noise and drift into the calm that waits beyond thought. Feel the weight of your body sink into the bed. The air grow slower, the world gentler. May your dreams carry you gently through forests of memory, through the quiet after battle, through the peace they never stopped believing in. This has been the Sleeping Hourglass, where the past tucks you in and history hums you to sleep. If tonight's story brought you warmth, you're always welcome to return, to sit again by the soft firelight of another forgotten tale. Sleep well, dear traveller. The stars keep watch above you, and somewhere, far beyond time, Wojtek still walks, steady, kind, and smiling in the dark.